Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. This is our first talk in our awardee speaker series. I would like to welcome Marc Parrish as the presenter and Ofer Hermoni, also with PieEye, to tell us a little bit about their service innovation, which won a distinguished recognition award with ISSIP. So over to you, Marc.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for the award, and thanks for having us do this. We started this company basically about a year ago and tried to meet a demand basically in the marketplace. My background is really in three things. One is very large data sets, marketing automation, and mobile technology. So I did things earlier on in my career where I worked for Palm Computing, which made a thing called the Palm Pilot. And we eventually evolved that into the first smartphone, which was called the Trio, which many people will remember and love. We had a stylus on it, so then we had a keyboard, and we had special ways of entering data and things like that. This was in the very early days of mobile meets smartphone. So in effect, it was the first smartphone, but people can have their own ideas that the iPhone was not really the first one. But in doing so, I saw that we were taking large, copious amounts of data from consumers, that we were doing things that we were trying to be responsible for. We were keeping it all in-house. If a third party was given this data, we had huge hurdles for them to get over to be able to share in that data. And we were doing things like algorithms and predictive algorithms in order to see what people's propensity to buy were, what kinds of recommendations we could make for apps and things like that. And in the end of the day, we found that basically the world went a different way. The world went to a lot of third-party data providers, third-party vendors, which took data, much of which was personally identifiable information, and they were processing it for the companies to do things like marketing automation or reviews or now e-commerce. And in the interim years, go to the next slide here. This is a sort of a brief history of data privacy laws. And as we go up the timeline here, we see that there's a big gap between about 1998 and 2018, where in 1996, we had a law come in called HIPAA, which was to protect your medical history. And the reason was that they wanted to protect medical history was that we had the AIDS crisis come in and people were being discriminated against because of that. And so therefore that data had to be protected. We moved on to that in a couple of years to this thing called COPPA, which protects the information of children, basically people who are preteens and below, from being on the internet and from companies handling it. And then it was a free-for-all basically until about 2018. You could take data. There was some attempt to sort of rein in companies from how they wanted to control data, but the GDPR, which is called the General Data Protection Regulation, came in Europe in 2018. That also had teeth in it so that companies could only do certain things with customer data, and they had to protect it, and they gave data rights to those consumers who had given in their own thing, in their own of their own volition, the access to that data in order for something that they got in return. California, which seems to be sort of at the leading edge of most of these things, then passed the thing in 2020 called the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And that basically was a watered down version of GDPR. And then it jumped over that we weren't satisfied with this. So we went to the voters themselves and say, do you want to implement something that's a little stronger like GDPR? And they approved it, and it's coming in at the end of this year. And then what you see is US states, which are basically passing along this idea that consumers' data wants to be protected. And Virginia, Colorado, and Utah have just passed laws within the last 12 months in order to do that. Most of them follow the California law and are not as stringent as the California law, but it shows you the general confluence of this. And I've got a little video here in the next one, which I want to play.
Since 2018, there has been a rapid growth of state-level privacy initiatives over a short period, with the majority of states now actively trying to protect their citizens' data privacy. California led the way with the California Consumer Privacy Act, which went into effect in 2020 and was strengthened by a further ballot initiative that year. Since then, Colorado and Virginia enacted data privacy laws. Not only are the number of proposed laws increasing, this year they doubled so far, but the laws have been granting more rights to the consumers and more obligations to companies holding their data.
So that just in a couple of minutes, that is the landscape of data privacy. And it shows you how it's complex, but it's changing very rapidly. And then within companies, especially within e-commerce companies, which do take a lot of consumer data and handle it, in sort of routine ways, there's an idea within the various titles, the various silos of the company, that they have concerns about data privacy, and they want to meet the consumer's expectations of that. In the marketing, department, you want customer satisfaction. So if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I don't want you to handle my data this way. I know what my data rights are," you're able to react to them very quickly and not frustrate them. And obviously, with security and legal, so with the CISO and the chief legal officer, they want to reduce the risk that you have of mishandling this PII, leaking the PII, or being contacted by a controlling authority to say, "You're not handling my data correctly." But the engineering team is usually metriced on things that are very high impact projects, and they usually prioritize this pretty low. It's not a revenue generator, it's a compliance and customer satisfaction project. And we recognize that then kicks the can down the road. And what we wanted to do with this company is make something that's very simple to install, doesn't impact engineering, connects your entire data ecosystem with the idea that privacy can be easily implemented across that and compliance. So with that being said, this is the usual experience of data privacy. You have a privacy policy, which just about everybody has and was required to have actually many years ago, a couple of decades ago. And usually what happens, so I've blanked out because this is an actual company's privacy policy, is that they address it usually here. Some attorney has come through and said, "Hey, you've got to address the California privacy rights, the European privacy rights, data transfers, things like that." So it's on there. And then when you interact with the company, this is a very usual interaction. It says, "Hey, I'm contacting you. I'm going to remove your data from here," but they actually don't really delete it from all of the data ecosystem. They delete it perhaps from the core system or one system. They don't delete it from the data warehouse, the third-party vendors. Moreover, a lot of this data cannot be, and this is one of the things that we do very well, it cannot be deleted because those records will impact your financial reporting, your ERP, many different things, and you can't orphan records that are attached to those records. So much of the approach is to leave the data in place and then anonymize it, what they call pseudonymization, which pseudonym is, obviously a name that you go by when you are doing writing, let's say. But at the end of the day, it's a complicated process. And what we've noticed over the course of time that almost every company, small, large, whatever, has this inability to do this in a routine way. And it's really a problem that if we solve it in a way that companies can do it quite easily, there's nothing standing in the way for them doing that. If they can solve this in an hour or two, they can connect their whole data ecosystem, they can give something to the consumer to invoke their data privacy rights easily, then it becomes actually quite valuable service. But as the processes are now, there's usually no user validation. So somebody can come in and just say, "I'm this person." They don't go back and check that it's that person. So there's no identification of the user data across the ecosystem, no ability to log that you've done it in a very, in a very professional way. There's usually no completed deletion. It's very expensive support resources that are doing it. So it's difficult compliance. And in that, basically, there are a couple of components. One is a forward-facing component, which is cookie consent, which as people, we've all seen it as they come onto websites. You have implied consent, you have explicit consent where people say yes. So if you go to a European website, they have one compliance methodology where you have to get consent explicit consent before you allow them to use a website. Then there are places like California where you can have implicit consent that somebody is using the website, therefore they've given consent to that little banner. There's also the data discovery and workflows, which is what I just talked about, which is going throughout the entire data ecosystem, finding where somebody's information is. If you anonymize them, you have to anonymize, let's say, an email address, which is usually the key. If you wipe it out and say that's customer 12345, you have to make sure that that record is repeated, that email is repeated across all the third-party vendors and systems, so that if you come back and try to tie that together as a record, you can see where it is, even though you don't know who it is. So the real execution of this is that we tie the whole thing together with reporting and logging, data mapping, third-party vendors and discovery. We have the intake methodology, which is complete. So we make sure that that's the person, we verify that that's the person, and then we go forward with a request in a completely automated way. And if you take a look, one of the things that is the advantage is that we basically have hundreds of connectors that we could put together for a third-party ecosystem. So if you have, let's say, Shopify along with Klaviyo, along with Yotpo or QuickBooks or things like that, we can put it as those third-party vendors. We know exactly how to connect to them, and to make sure when a request comes in, we can find all of the data the way that it's supposed to be found. So in a sense, the rapid growth of e-commerce has necessitated that most of these companies have a need to do something like this. They may not be covered under the law because, let's say, the law like GDPR says you have to have a certain threshold of revenue in order to be covered by it. But the question is, if you're an e-commerce player and you're just below that threshold, you still have to comply because the customer's expectations are that you're going to comply. You can't just say to a customer request that we're not covered by that, we're not going to do anything, thanks. So we see this as a very large and expanding market. The systems themselves are sort of complex to put together. So most of these things that we do are not really accessible to mid-range companies. They're not going to do this on their own as a project, since they have all these other things to do. And so we make it quick, easy. Many of our implementations are done within an hour or less. And, and we're able to then, stitch together something that does privacy for your customers, legally required workflows that, that the laws are demanding, automating the connectors, scanning and finding the sensitive data. And sensitive data and PII are used sort of interchangeably. There's a slight difference to them, but connecting all the third-party sensitive data and anonymizing the PII data is what we do as a company very well. So that's how, we call ourselves brand-friendly privacy for e-commerce.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. That was really clear. And, on all the criteria for the ISSIP scoring, you just came across fantastic. This was really viewed as an amazing service innovation that's going to help B2B commerce, protect consumers, responsible innovation. It scored very, very highly. So thank you very much, Marc and Ofer, for submitting it. And since we have Alan on, Alan, do you have any questions? We got like a minute or two left. Oh, you're on mute. I muted you, sorry. Let me unmute you. Let me see if I can.
Okay, I got it. I'm coming here from, I'm coming off just writing a very long proposal to the Horizon Europe group on precisely these issues with, on behalf of the Cybersecurity Cyber Law Center at the University of Haifa. I work with Amnon Reichman and a bunch of legal professors, and also with people at IBM in Haifa and the computer science department who are interested in homomorphic encryption and in multi-party privacy, you know, protecting people from unallowed data use and how to still manage to do data mining and data analysis on data that's been protected by either pseudonymization or by homomorphic encryption. So I'm new to the scene because I haven't done my own research on the matter, but I'm working with a bunch of people in Haifa and in Europe who are terribly keen on this issue. And I hope that we can maybe make some kind of connection, particularly with people like, what's his name? Saltor, Professor Saltor at the University of Bologna, who's both a PhD in computer science and in the law, and he's working very hard on something called privacy by design, building systems in Bologna along with the people here in Haifa. So I think there's a certain amount of synergy with what you're doing, and we need to understand better, or at least the professional people in the group need to understand better. I'm just a connector at this point. I don't really have a research interest in the matter, but I have a very, I've just been working for 6 weeks with these people, and I think they should know about what you're doing and be in touch with you.
Yeah, that would be great. There's a lot of research that's being done from this about, you know, how you do not give information to the other side and still identify yourself, like a password, so they don't have to own certain information that you have. There's also, there are records across, you know, the US government that they want to keep your information secure. So they have one central thing called ID.me where you get ID'd. You're able to go through their login, which is, you know, more secure, and then move over to Social Security Administration or the IRS or something like that. So data privacy is not something at the beginning of my career that we thought about much, except that try to lock up all this PII data very securely. Don't let it go anywhere, because once somebody intrudes and takes it, you know, it's really more of a PR disaster than anything else. We didn't have legal recourse to it. Now, states are starting to come around to say there should be a legal recourse, that companies should have, there should be some teeth for doing that. And, you know, what we're trying to do is make this very, very easy for companies to say, look, it's a project, I'm running 100 miles an hour, and I need to be able to, complete this, but I just don't have the time to do it.
Right. I mean, our proposal is focused on health data. We're working with 2 or 3 hospitals in Europe who have very severe data restrictions. And the condition for IBM to join this proposal was that we don't touch anybody's PII. We have to use synthetic data to test all of the algorithms and to test everything. They're not going to be anywhere near somebody's real health data. They're petrified of touching it.
Yep, because they're going to do it right. And I just want to thank you all. We're at the end of the hour. I have to jump to a new call, but on behalf of ISSIP again, Marc and Ofer, congratulations on the Distinguished Recognition Award. Alan, so delighted that you could join, and it looks like it's a great connection. Let me know if you need, either of you need help connecting. I'll make sure you get connected. And with that, I'll end the recording.
Okay, Ofer, are you originally from Israel?
Yes.
I guessed as much.
He's just posing as an Israeli in New Jersey.
Okay, well, I'm posing as an Australian in Haifa.
Where are you from in Australia?
Originally from Melbourne.
So my daughter is going to Melbourne Law School now.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Small world.
Yeah, well, she's Australian.